Welcome to the Becoming Aware podcast, where I, Genevieve Faulkner, share what I'm becoming aware of.
Hello and welcome to the Becoming Aware podcast. My name is Genevieve Faulkner, your host, and if you're watching this on YouTube, hi. So today I thought I would talk about the witch wound. So do you have a witch wound? It's something that can kind of show up in a number of different ways, and there are a couple of different kind of parts to this wound. So one of the things that having a witch wound creates is this resistance to being seen, this resistance to being acknowledged, this resistance to being part of a community. Like you'll kind of want to avoid crowds, be the outsider, and not speak up about what is actually true for you because of the trauma of persecution, of being burnt at the stake, of all of the other horrible things that they did to witches or to women they had decided were witches. And so when you're holding on to that trauma and that wounding, that's what it creates. It creates this invisible cloak, this need to hide, and this resistance within, almost like it's almost like running from this threat constantly. Do you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like feeling, someone's going to get you, still feeling on the run from the witch hunters, right? Someone's going to get you, always on edge, kind of having to, be really careful about what you say in the fear of saying something wrong, because if you say something wrong, they're going to accuse you of being a witch. It can also show up in a resistance of fully embodying your psychic capacities or intuitive capacities. So when people have like an aversion to perceiving the future, or they have an aversion to some sort of healing, or they have an aversion to entities and demons and all of that kind of thing, it can be a result of the things that have occurred when they have been in lifetimes or spaces, realities, dimensions, where they've been a little bit more magic, right? So if you were the, person in the village that could see the future, and you saw something happening that perhaps, or something did happen that was catastrophic, or you saw something and then it happened, and then you got blamed for it, right? You created this because you saw it. This is your fault. Again, you can hold on to the trauma of that kind of thing, and it can create this kind of fear of like, oh no, I can't see the future again, because then everybody's going to blame me for what happens. They're going to make me wrong. I'm going to be persecuted and punished and tortured again. So that's one example. If you had lifetimes where you were a healer, and perhaps you couldn't help someone and you were then blamed for what happened to them, then you can have this resistance to energy work, or this resistance to healing, that fear of working with people, because you're afraid of that happening again, because you're carrying the trauma still, because you're carrying the wounding and the pain of being misunderstood, of being the scapegoat, so to speak. Entities and demons, that's a fun one. When you've got that aversion to that, it's usually because you've used them in other lifetimes. You've used the magic. There's so many different areas of magic, aspects of magic, elements of magic, ways in which to use magic. And so, us that have had these lifetimes of being these magical creatures that use all sorts of ways of bringing our will into reality, or working our will, that does include sometimes lifetimes where we've used entities and demons, particularly if you've had any lifetimes where you've been part of any kind of cults, or, spiritual work that has maybe been a little cult-like, anything that has an element of control or gaslighting will often have demons and entities attached to it. So when we've made promises with demons, or we've had them manipulate us into situations where perhaps we gave our power over, and we have the wounds of that, perhaps, you know, being a psychic in some lifetime and then having entities tell us all sorts of things that perhaps weren't true. And then that creating issues within the village, and then the persecution and the punishment and the whatever came next as a result of that, you know, creates this resistance to engaging with the unseen world. So it can show up in all of those different ways. Now, the way that it also shows up is through this inability to manifest what you desire. Because if you perhaps were acknowledged for what you created in other lifetimes, or people made you really wrong for the things that happened that weren't your fault, then you can kind of like have this fear of your own power where you're like, I don't want to create that again. I don't want the world to end. So I'm just not going to use my manifestation power. Like, I don't want anyone to see me. Or perhaps you actually did use it in lifetimes, and then you perhaps created more than everybody else, and they all resented you and attacked you for that reason, and you're holding on to the wounding of that. Then that can create that resistance to really owning, claiming, and acknowledging the power that you have because of that. So there can also be elements of being cursed. So you might feel cursed. You might feel like nothing works for you. You might feel like really disempowered, or just like you have no power. Sometimes, like, the thing that we are the most kind of like the effect of is actually where we've got the greatest power, but we're hiding it from ourselves. So when there's an area, like if you feel very much like disempowered in being able to consciously create your life, or being able to be psychic, or, you know, a healer, or whatever else, there is probably some wounding there that could be taken care of, and some power beneath that would really kind of just, you know, change your entire reality. So feeling cursed can be a result of having lifetimes where you've, you know, perhaps had all sorts of things going on with regards to the magic of being able to be cursed or curse others. So when you have a witch wound, another kind of sign of that can be where you're tormented by entities and demons. So again, it's kind of like witches don't just have one capacity. Witches have many capacities. There's like that label of witch was, you know, at times seen as a wrongness, but within that definition, there's actually someone that has the ability to really be in oneness with the universe, be in oneness with nature, include the earth in a way that brings a level of power to their manifestations, that they can make things happen. But there's so many different elements to that. So there's the conscious creation part, but there's also the ability to perceive futures. There's the ability to help somebody heal. There's the ability to curse someone. Like, there's so many different elements of magic. And so there can be this element of when you've got a witch wound, you've got this torment going on with entities, partially because you've got the capacity to be a medium, but also because you perhaps have done all sorts of things with entities and demons in other lifetimes when you were using those magics. And we can have these kind of unconscious oaths, vows, commitments, obligations running from other times where we signed up to things, sometimes when we were misled, and sometimes because we were just having so much fun being magic and using those ways of, you know, creating, that sometimes it just kind of remains unresolved and it keeps being in play in the next lifetime. So when you've got these kinds of oaths, sometimes we can have them with entities and demons, and so they can be tormenting us because we've sold kind of our power to them through buying the lies that they have more power than us. So that can be signs of witch wounds. So how do we heal it? So theta healing is one way. Like, I've done quite a bit of work with people that have had witch wounds. I've done a lot of work on myself. It was something that I definitely explored a lot in the early years, clearing the witch wound stuff. So acknowledge. So healing is like there's different elements to the healing, and if you had a theta healing session or more than one, each time you might look at different aspects of what is going to heal that wound, because with any kind of like wound like this, a witch wound, a mother wound, a father wound, masculine wound, feminine wound, there's going to be different elements to it, and as you address each element, it's going to allow you to access more of your power to create your reality. So part of the journey of healing the witch wound is acknowledging the difference in time, because when we have that fear of being persecuted or being acknowledged or being seen because of the things that have happened in the past, that was, so many years ago. The consciousness on the planet is different now to what it was then. And so what is possible for people to receive now is very different to then. And so consciously acknowledging that can actually assist you to kind of integrate into your unconscious the place and space where perhaps you're not acknowledging the difference in time. Because when we have that resistance and that fear of something happening again, part of that, it doesn't matter whether it's to do with wounding of witches, witch wounds, or whether it's something else that we're afraid of happening again. It's usually where we're not acknowledging the evolution, the growth that's occurred, the change that's occurred for ourselves or for the other people involved or for the planet, or the collective. So acknowledging that the time is different now, but it's also like what we basically do in theta healing sessions, and this is something that you can actually do for yourself and perhaps integrate things for yourself also, is you acknowledge what you've learnt on the journey of evolution that you've had. So if you've had these lifetimes where you've done all of these different things, what have you learnt from having the experiences that you've had? Now, when we do theta healing sessions, we have the ability to go into the theta brainwave, and in doing that, it allows us to access the subconscious and different timelines and spaces and realities, and remember, sometimes actually see like movies, or the practitioner might see, or the person might see, of the other lifetimes that they've experienced, or they may feel it, or they might hear, in their mind what has occurred. And that allows them to get a sense of, what they might have been learning from the experience that they had. So meditation, like you can do this kind of thing for yourself, but, if you want help with that, because it can be kind of useful to have someone guiding you through that process, you know where to find me. Acknowledging what you've learned. So with the witch wounds, there's many different lessons dependent on what aspect is wounded. So, when you look at the persecution, part of what you may have learned is knowing how to kind of have your reality and acknowledge what you are and acknowledge what you're capable of, but not necessarily needing to share it with people. When we have that need for other people to get our reality, or get our power, get our magic, we can overshare with people, and then people that can't receive that kind of thing, they're going to make you wrong for it. They're going to judge you. And if they're afraid, that's where they go on the defensive and attack. So knowing when to speak and when not to speak, knowing what to share and when not to share, that can be part of the journey of having these wounds or having the experiences of being persecuted as a witch. If it's perhaps, again, that ties into perceiving the future, right? So knowing what to share, what not to share, knowing also your responsibility in that, because there's a journey of awakening with any kind of psychic ability, and there's an element of having discernment in that, of knowing where something's coming from and how to share it and when to share it, because there is a lot of responsibility in being able to perceive, things psychically. And I say that because there are people, on this planet that will hand over their responsibility for their own creation to you. They will give you so much authority when you have these capacities that when you tell them something, they will create it because they have so much kind of belief in the psychic or the guru or whatever. And so having discernment and awareness of what to share and when to share it, whether it's going to create greater, whether or not it's coming from a projection, you know, something that's within the subconscious of somebody, or whether or not it's the highest truth. Because, you know, the journey of awakening, when you are just waking up as a psychic, you might think that you're having all of these divine messages brought into your world, but actually you might be receiving the fears in somebody's subconscious, and it may not be the reality, but it's actually, you know, you might share that as the reality, and then they can end up, you know, being worse off as a result. So it's important to kind of like in that journey of awakening your like psychic capacities, to have discernment and no discernment about what to share and when to share. You can't do that when your ego's out of balance. And so that's part of the journey of the witch wound as well, is having a healthy ego. When we start to explore the world of magic, some of us, sometimes it can go to our head a little, you know, when you realize that you have all of these abilities to do things that, you know, some people can't do. You can, yeah, it can go to your head. So I think that is, you know, maybe that's a rite of passage. Maybe it is a rite of passage. Maybe everybody that has practiced like witchcraft or magic, conscious creation, maybe all of them, maybe many of them have gone through that experience of having, you know, that power go to their head. And then perhaps the other part of that initiation is an ego death of kind of something outside of them, bringing them back down to size so that they learn the importance of humility, right? To be able to practice magic and not create more wounding for yourself, you have to be willing to kind of be humble at the same time as acknowledging your power. So not like perhaps getting power drunk and using your abilities to control others. If you're controlling others, I believe that's where you end up creating karmic type lessons, right? Karma exists through things being out of balance. And so when you're doing things out of balance, you're going to have the lesson of the other side of that. If you're respecting all things in the process and honoring all things in the journey of magic, then you're not going to have that same effect. The other element of the witch wound, the learning, is to integrate the shadow of the witch. So some people will have this, you know, they'll be okay with some of it, but there might be elements of real resistance to certain power of magic. And sometimes that's the people that have been cursed. So if you've had lots of lifetimes where you've cursed people and you're experiencing that as a result of that karma, then there's a lesson in that, right? Part of that lesson is, of course, to know when it's appropriate, like know when it's going to create greater to curse someone. That might sound a little bit weird, but some of these capacities, like there's no right or wrong with this. It's more that you can kind of use it for selfish motives and from your own ego, or you can use it because it's what's required in order to create some sort of change. So if somebody is creating all sorts of devastation and disaster, you know, it might be a gift to be able to curse, to stop that from occurring, right? But if you're just doing it because you feel like you should be the most powerful one, and you've decided they've wronged you in some way, then perhaps there's going to be some sort of karma as a result. So it's knowing, like, kind of like how to step into the maturity of having power and not using it in a selfish or dishonorable way. I believe that is part of the witch wound also, or the integration of the witch wound, the learning of the witch wound. So there's elements of, there's the fear of the persecution, but there's also like this thing that will occur with people that have had lots of witch lifetimes, where they'll have the witch wounding, and the witch wounding causes them to have these witch wars with other practitioners. So sometimes we have soulmate relationships show up where they've been witches with us, and we've got some sort of power imbalance as a result of the lifetimes where we've had all sorts of sorcery and magic with them, and that can cause like really intense dynamics between, you know, friendships or relationships or whatever. If you feel like someone in your life is, you know, you feel cursed by them, you feel powerless, or they're able to psychically attack you really well. It might be that you've been a witch with them, or you've practiced magic with them, you've been part of a coven with them in some other lifetime, or you've been their apprentice, or they've been yours. And there's karmic stuff there, or there's oaths and vows that have been made where perhaps you've been obligated to serve them, or they've been obligated to serve you. And in this lifetime, because that dynamic hasn't been at play, it's like perceived as a wrongness, so there's this attack, right? So when you start to look at the dynamics of the wounding and what's showing up, and you get curious about it, and you look at what in the past has been, and make the choice to kind of end the obligations that are still at play that no longer need to be, but also look at what is the evolution of this, what's the growth of this, then you can step into the power of all of that, and not be the effect of it anymore. A lot of like people in spiritual circles can have this resistance to the cursing, but there is no wrongness of it, and there is some real kind of magic with being willing to face the shadow aspects of yourself. So if I believe so many of us have had so many lifetimes of doing all sorts of, you know, dark things to be able to get to this point where we have the ability to actually look at it all and release what was there, so that we can change the consciousness of it. You can't always change the consciousness of something from the outside. You have to be willing to be included in it in order to create change. So there's a lot of light workers that have been part of the darkness, or the anti-consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, in other times, to be able to create change. So if you can acknowledge that can help you to unravel the places and spaces where you're being the effect of any kind of darkness. How do you know when you've healed the witch wound? Couple of things. One, you won't have a problem being seen. You'll be able to speak clearly. You'll be able to be part of groups. Like, there won't be this resistance to, be included in the world. But also, you won't have any problem manifesting things. You'll be able to create the reality that you would like to create. You'll be able to be psychic. You'll be able to talk to entities. You'll be able to assist people to heal and change and release things. There just won't be any kind of demons working against you when there's a witch wound, and you've got all of these other lifetimes where you've done all of these magics and you've signed up to all of things, thinking that you were going to get power through these entities. Then that's where they can affect you. So all of that goes away when you actually heal or integrate the lessons and the learnings of being a witch, and whatever else you want to kind of put under that category. So any of the dark lifetimes, the voodoo, the working with, whatever, there's so much to integrate and learn, and allow yourself to step into being again when you let go of the fear of the persecution and the wounding and whatever has happened in the past. The past is not the same as now. You know, it is time for us all to shift and change and allow ourselves to step into a lot more of what we came here to be, right? Reclaim the magic. Let yourself be who you are. I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for listening, guys. If you have any questions about witch wounds or any aspect of magical stuff, feel free to ask me. If there's anything that you would like me to do a video about, let me know in the comments also. Yeah, and if you would like to work on this stuff, you are more than welcome to book sessions with me. I do one-to-one sessions, and I do packages as well, where you can get it for a little bit of a cheaper price when you sign up to, you know, just doing a little bit more of the deeper work, not just a one session. So yeah, you can check that out via my webpage. I'll leave a link to that. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Till next time. Bye.